At her wedding, my daughter hung my photo at the entrance with the caption, "No entry." A cruel blow from the only child who was supposed to be my pride and joy. Instead of celebrating, I turned around and walked away, leaving behind my dreams of a happy family. But 3 hours later, my phone exploded with 73 missed calls. Her betrayal had turned into chaos. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. The harsh blue glow sliced through my warm reading lamp like a blade. My phone buzzed against the leather armrest, violent and insistent, shattering the peaceful January evening I'd carefully constructed around myself. The newspaper crinkled as I fumbled for the device, my reading glasses catching the aggressive light. "Dad!" Eva's face exploded across the screen, her excitement so radiant it seemed to pulse through the pixels. "I have incredible news. I'm engaged." My coffee mug froze halfway to my lips. Behind her, I caught glimpses of what looked like an expensive apartment. Marble countertops, floor-to-ceiling windows revealing San Francisco's glittering skyline. "Sweetheart, that's—" I started, but she thrust her left hand toward the camera. The diamond caught every light source in her apartment, throwing rainbow fragments across her flushed cheeks. "Look at this ring, Dad. Isn't it gorgeous?" Before I could respond properly, a man's face appeared beside hers. Tall, sharp jawline, perfectly styled dark hair. His smile looked like it belonged in a toothpaste commercial. "Mr. Rice." His voice carried that smooth confidence I'd learned to distrust in my real estate days. "I'm Harold Kensington. I promise your daughter will be the happiest woman in the world." "Dad, I'm so happy for you. Tell me about Harold," I managed, trying to match their energy while studying this stranger who'd somehow captured my daughter's heart. "He's a successful cryptocurrency investor, Dad. He has such ambitious plans." Iva practically bounced as she spoke. "Harold's portfolio includes blockchain startups, NFT ventures." "Market's been volatile lately," Harold interrupted smoothly, his hand sliding to rest on Iva's shoulder. Something about the gesture struck me as possessive, rather than affectionate. "But I've diversified across multiple sectors. Tech, renewable energy, some traditional stocks for stability." I noticed how his eyes never quite met mine through the camera. They darted to something off-screen, maybe another device, maybe checking the time. His expensive-looking watch caught the light, but something about the way he positioned his wrist seemed deliberate, almost performative. "When's the wedding?" I asked. "March 15th?" Eva squealed. "I know it's soon, but Harold found this amazing venue that had a last-minute cancellation. The Fairmont San Francisco. Can you believe it?" 2 months. They were planning to marry in 2 months. "That's quite fast," I said carefully. Harold's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "When you know, sir. Plus, Iva deserves the wedding of her dreams, and this venue won't wait." Through the screen, I watched him absently twist a gold ring on his pinky finger, a nervous habit that contradicted his polished exterior. His other hand remained firmly planted on Iva's shoulder, thumb moving in small circles that seemed more controlling than comforting. "Harold's been so thoughtful about everything," Iva gushed, leaning into him. "He's handling all the vendors, the arrangements. I barely have to worry about anything." That should have made me happy. Instead, something cold settled in my stomach. "Well, I can't wait to meet you properly, Harold," I said, forcing warmth into my voice. "Likewise, Mr. Rice. I've heard so much about you." After more excited chatter about flowers and catering, they finally hung up. I sat in my leather chair as darkness crept back into the room, the phone's glow fading to black in my palm. The newspaper lay forgotten on the floor, and my coffee had gone cold. Something about Harold bothered me, though I couldn't name what. Maybe it was the way he dominated the conversation while seeming deferential, or how his expensive clothes looked just slightly wrong. Too new, too perfect, like a costume rather than a wardrobe. I stared at my reflection in the black screen, watching my own doubts multiply in the darkness. 13 days of restless nights had passed since that video call. When Harold phoned asking for a man-to-man conversation, I'd agreed partly out of curiosity and partly from an unshakable need to understand what was troubling me about him. The Caf, in Manhattan's Upper East Side, was exactly the kind of place I'd expect Harold to choose. Understated wealth, marble tables, the sort of discretion that comes with $50 entrees. I spotted him in a corner booth, somehow managing to look nervous despite his perfectly pressed navy suit. "Mr. Rice, thank you for coming." He stood to shake my hand, his grip firm but slightly damp. "Please sit. Can I order you something?" "Coffee's fine." I studied his face as we settled across from each other. In person, the polished charm seemed more fragile, like expensive veneer over cheap wood. "How are the wedding preparations going?" I asked. "Wonderful, actually. That's part of why I wanted to speak with you." He fidgeted with his coffee cup, rotating it precisely 90 degrees. "Can I trust you with something confidential?" The question hung between us like a trap waiting to spring. "Of course," I said, though every instinct screamed otherwise. Harold leaned forward, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "My investments are temporarily frozen due to market conditions. Nothing serious. Regulatory review of one of my crypto funds. Should resolve within 6 months, but—" He paused, letting out what sounded like a practiced sigh. "Eva dreams of a fairy tale wedding, and I can't bear to disappoint her." I watched his eyes as he spoke. They focused on a point just over my left shoulder, never making direct contact. "The venue requires full payment up front," he continued. "Flowers, catering, everything. It's more than I can liquidate right now without taking massive losses on my frozen assets." "How much do you need, Harold?" 50,000 would cover everything. I'll return every cent by year's end, I promise. With interest, of course." He reached into his jacket and pulled out what looked like official documents. "These show my portfolio value. Over $2 million in assets, just temporarily inaccessible." The papers looked legitimate, full of official seals and legal language I didn't understand, but something about the way he'd produced them so smoothly, like a magician revealing a planted card, made my skin crawl. "Mr. Rice, I know how this must sound, but I love your daughter more than anything in this world. I just want to give her the perfect beginning to our life together." He was good, I had to admit. The vulnerability seemed genuine, the documentation convincing, and 50,000, while significant, wouldn't devastate my retirement savings. "All right," I heard myself saying, "but Iva must never know about this." "Absolutely. It would crush her to think I couldn't provide for her properly." Relief flooded his features so quickly it almost looked genuine. "You have no idea how much this means to me, sir." I wrote the check with deliberate slowness, my hand hesitating above the signature line. Harold's eyes tracked every movement of my pen like a hawk watching prey. The moment I tore the check free, he practically lunged across the table to take it, folding it carefully into his wallet. "You won't regret this, Mr. Rice. Eva's going to have the most beautiful wedding San Francisco has ever seen." He left immediately after that, citing urgent calls with vendors. I sat alone in the expensive cafe, watching my coffee grow cold while affluent New Yorkers chatted around me about market trends and vacation homes. My phone felt heavy in my pocket. I should call Eva, ask more questions about Harold's business, do some basic checking that any rational person would do before handing over $50,000. Instead, I finished my coffee and headed home, carrying the weight of a secret that already felt like a mistake. 6 days had crawled by since that cafe meeting, each one heavier than the last. I moved through my Brooklyn apartment like a ghost haunting his own life, the cordless phone never far from my hand. Every surface seemed to mock me, the clean kitchen where I barely ate, the living room where I couldn't concentrate on reading, the bedroom where sleep came in fragments. Margaret's photograph watched me from the nightstand, her gentle smile frozen in better times. I picked up the silver frame, running my thumb across the glass. "Margaret always said, 'Truth is more important than comfort,'" I whispered to her image. She'd have known what to do. Margaret never trusted smooth talkers, never let charm override her instincts. When Iva was 16 and wanted to date that boy with the motorcycle, Margaret had done a background check that would have impressed the FBI. But Margaret was gone, and I was making decisions that felt like betrayals of everything she'd taught me about protecting our daughter. The phone buzzed in my other hand. Eva's contact photo smiled up at me. She'd inherited her mother's intuitive eyes, the same eyes that were now clouded by love and trust in a man who might be lying about everything. I dialed her number, hung up before it could ring, then immediately dialed again. Dad, perfect timing. I just got back from the florist. How are the wedding preparations going? I tried to sound casual, though my voice came out strained. Wonderful, Dad. Harold is so attentive to details. He's handling everything. The band, the photographer, even coordinating with the hotel staff. I barely have to think about anything except showing up in my dress. Every enthusiastic word felt like a small knife twist. Harold was controlling every aspect of their wedding with her money. My money. Eva, I started, then stopped. The promise I'd made to Harold felt like chains around my tongue. Are you sure you know Harold well enough? Of course, Dad. Why do you ask? Her voice shifted, becoming slightly defensive. I could hear her moving around her apartment, probably arranging flowers or sorting through wedding magazines. Just parental worries. You've only known him a few months? 6 months, actually. And when you meet the right person, time doesn't matter the same way. She laughed, but it sounded forced. You taught me to trust my instincts, remember? Well, my instincts tell me Harold is perfect for me. Perfect. The word echoed in my mind like a warning bell. Nothing was perfect, especially not people who claimed to be. I'm sure you're right, sweetheart. I can't wait to dance with you at your wedding. After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table and pulled out the leather journal Margaret had given me years ago. Most of the pages remained blank. I'd never been much for writing down thoughts. Tonight felt different. I needed to record this decision, this moment when I chose Harold's promise over my own protective instincts. February 9th, 2025. Gave Harold $50,000 for wedding expenses. Eva doesn't know. Something feels wrong, but I made a promise. Margaret would say I'm being a fool, but sometimes being a good father means trusting your daughter's choices, even when they scare you. I closed the journal and returned it to the drawer. Outside my window, Brooklyn hummed with evening life, couples walking home from dinner, families heading to late movies, the comfortable rhythm of ordinary people living ordinary lives. For the first time in decades, I envied them their simple problems. The wedding was 5 weeks away, 5 weeks for Harold to prove my suspicions wrong, or for me to discover just how badly I'd misjudged the man who wanted to marry my daughter. I turned off the kitchen light and headed to bed, carrying Margaret's photo with me. If I was making a mistake, at least I wouldn't make it alone. 3 days had passed since I'd written those words in Margaret's journal. Now I stood outside Le Bernardin, San Francisco's temple to French cuisine, watching through floor-to-ceiling windows as Harold and Iva laughed over champagne flutes. The morning flight from JFK had left me jet-lagged and hollow-eyed, but I'd managed to shower and put on my best suit, a navy Brooks Brothers that suddenly felt cheap under the restaurant's crystal chandeliers. Dad! Iva bounced toward me in a flowing emerald dress that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage. Her engagement ring caught every light in the room as she wrapped me in a hug that smelled like expensive perfume and happiness. Harold rose slowly from their corner table, his movements calculated and predatory. The suit he wore, charcoal wool with subtle pinstripes, looked like it belonged in a magazine spread. My $50,000 had been put to good use. Mr. Rice, so wonderful to see you again. His handshake lingered too long, his thumb pressing against my knuckles with unnecessary force. Please, sit. Harold gestured to the chair across from them, but somehow positioned himself so he commanded the best view of the dining room. I took the liberty of ordering wine, a Chassagne Montrachet that pairs beautifully with their seafood. Before I could respond, he was signaling the sommelier, launching into a detailed discussion about tannins and oak aging that left me feeling like a tourist in my own daughter's life. The menu changes seasonally, Harold continued, not bothering to hand me the leather-bound folder. But I recommend the John Dory, unless you prefer something more traditional. The word traditional dripped with condescension. Dad's actually quite adventurous, Iva said, reaching across to squeeze my hand. Remember when you tried that sushi place in Chinatown? Mr. Rice, do you still use a checkbook? How authentic. Harold's smile never wavered, but his eyes glittered with malice. I felt my jaw tighten. Sometimes the old ways work best. Of course, though I imagined keeping track of expenses must be challenging without digital banking. He leaned back in his chair, one arm draped possessively around Iva's shoulders. Eva, your father probably remembers when Bitcoin cost pennies, don't you, sir? Harold Maybe we should discuss something else. I tried to keep my voice level. Of course, sorry. I forget not everyone adapts so quickly to new realities. He turned to Iva with theatrical concern. Sweetheart, should we explain cryptocurrency basics? Or would that be overwhelming? Eva giggled, actually giggled, like I was some doddering grandfather who needed protection from modern concepts. The waiter appeared with our first course, an elaborate arrangement of scallops that Harold dissected with surgical precision while explaining market volatility to Iva. Every few minutes he'd toss me a bone. You might find this interesting, Mr. Rice, before diving back into jargon designed to exclude me. Harold, you're so smart. Eva gazed at him with pure adoration. Dad, you're lucky to have such a son-in-law. When the check arrived, Harold made a grand show of producing a black American Express card, waving away my attempt to contribute with magnanimous dismissal. Please, Mr. Rice, this is my treat, after all. His eyes met mine with calculated cruelty. I can certainly afford it. Outside, I climbed into a taxi while Harold helped Iva into his Tesla. Through the rear window, I watched him kiss her forehead with tender possessiveness, his laughter carrying across the evening air like a victory song. My fists clenched in my lap as the city lights blurred past. Something was very, very wrong with Harold Kensington. Sleep was impossible. I lay in my generic hotel bed until 11:30, replaying every smirk, every calculated insult, every moment Harold had made me feel small in front of my own daughter. Finally, I gave up and moved to the cramped desk, still wearing my wrinkled dinner shirt and loosened tie. The hotel's Wi-Fi password was taped to the lamp base. I opened my laptop and stared at the search bar, unsure where to begin. Harold Kensington, I typed. The first page showed LinkedIn profiles and some tech blog mentions, all consistent with his story. Too consistent. I scrolled deeper, adding San Francisco to narrow results. Page 3 yielded something different. A business registration for Kensington Digital Ventures, filed just 6 months ago. The address was a UPS store. I tried Harold Kensington fraud. The screen flickered, then filled with court documents. Los Angeles County Superior Court. Case number CV 2024-7891. Harold James Kensington, defendant in a civil lawsuit for misappropriation of funds, identity theft, and investment fraud. Court case in Los Angeles. Investment fraud, I whispered to the empty room. My hands trembled as I clicked through pages of legal documents. The plaintiff was a woman named Rebecca Martinez, age 31, who'd given Harold $180,000 for what she believed were cryptocurrency investments. The photo showed a pretty brunette with trusting eyes that looked remarkably like Eva's. I searched Harold Kensington Los Angeles victims. More cases emerged. Sarah Chen, $95,000. Jennifer Walsh, $240,000. Always the same pattern. Young, successful women. Always the same promises of investment opportunities. Always the same devastating losses. Harold Kensington accused of misappropriating $200,000. I read aloud from a news article, my voice cracking. But it was the photo gallery that made my blood freeze. Harold with Rebecca at what looked like an engagement party. Harold with Sarah at a romantic dinner. Harold with Jennifer, her left hand prominently displaying a diamond ring identical to Iva's. I spent the next 4 hours printing everything. Court filings, news articles, victim testimonies, police reports. The hotel's business center printer worked overtime as I built a fortress of evidence around my laptop. Each document revealed new horrors. Harold had used at least 3 different last names: Kensington, Morrison, and Richards. He specialized in targeting women through dating apps, crafting elaborate personas as a successful entrepreneur. The engagement phase lasted exactly 6 months, just long enough to build trust and access bank accounts. By 5 a.m., coffee cups littered the desk, and my shirt hung open at the collar. The evidence covered every surface: photos of Harold's previous victims, screenshots of fraudulent investment documents, testimonies from devastated families. My goodness, what is he doing to my daughter? The question hung in the stale hotel air like smoke. Outside, San Francisco was waking up. Early commuters grabbing coffee, joggers hitting the streets, normal people living normal lives while my world crumbled into criminal patterns and broken promises. I organized the documents into manila folders, each victim getting her own file. Rebecca's folder was thickest. She'd fought Harold in court for 2 years before giving up. Sarah had tried to warn other women online until Harold's lawyers silenced her. Jennifer had simply disappeared from social media entirely. The final document made me sick, a psychological profile compiled by the FBI's white-collar crime unit. Harold demonstrated classic narcissistic patterns with sociopathic tendencies, showing particular skill at exploiting familial bonds to achieve financial objectives. Dawn crept through the hotel curtains as I stacked the evidence in chronological order. My phone showed 6:47 a.m. Eva would be getting ready for work soon, probably humming wedding songs while Harold watched from their bed, planning his next move. I reached for my phone with steady hands. The time for secrets had ended. Valentine's Day morning brought crystal clear California sunshine streaming through my hotel window. The irony wasn't lost on me as I arranged Harold's criminal history across the desk like playing cards in a deadly game. Each document told the same story: romance, manipulation, financial devastation. I dialed Iva's number at exactly 7:15 a.m., knowing she'd be awake, but Harold might still be in the shower. She answered on the second ring, her voice bright with the particular joy of a bride 3 weeks before her wedding. "Morning, Dad. Did you sleep well? Wasn't dinner amazing?" The happiness in her voice made what I had had to do even more brutal. "Eva, I need to tell you something important. Are you sitting down?" "I'm getting ready for work, but what's wrong? You sound serious." I held Rebecca Martinez's court filing in my free hand, drawing strength from another father's failed attempt to save his daughter. "Eva, Harold asked me for $50,000 for the wedding. You told me he was a millionaire." Silence stretched across the phone line like a taut wire. "You're lying. Harold would have told me." Her voice cracked with disbelief. "Sweetheart, he said his assets were frozen, and he needed money for the venue. He made me promise not to tell you." "That's impossible. Harold shows me his investment accounts all the time. He has over $2 million. He has a court case for fraud, sweetheart. I have the documents right here. Los Angeles County, case number CV 2024-7891. He stole money from a woman named Rebecca Martinez." I heard movement in the background, Harold's voice asking what was wrong. Eva's breathing became rapid and shallow. "You're making this up because you can't accept that I've grown up. You can't stand that I don't need you anymore." "Eva, please just look at the evidence. There are other women, Sarah Chen, Jennifer Walsh. He's done this before, exactly the same pattern." The phone changed hands abruptly. Harold's smooth voice replaced my daughter's tears. "Mr. Rice, I understand you're concerned, but these accusations are completely false. I was cleared of all charges in Los Angeles. The case is still pending, Harold. I have the current filings. You have outdated information from disgruntled former business partners. Eva knows the truth about my finances." In the background, I could hear my daughter sobbing. Harold's voice became softer, more manipulative. "Sweetheart, your father is trying to sabotage our happiness. Some parents can't let go. Let me talk to Iva." My voice came out harder than I'd intended. "She's too upset right now. These false accusations have really hurt her." Iva's voice cut through, shrill with pain and anger. "How could you do this to me? How could you lie about Harold just to ruin my wedding?" "I'm not lying. There are photos of him with other women, engagement rings identical to yours." "Enough! You can't accept that I've found someone who loves me for who I am, not who you want me to be." I tried one more time, my voice breaking. "Eva, please, just look at the evidence before you marry him. I'm sending everything to your email, right now. Don't come to my wedding. I'm serious. You've chosen to believe lies over your own daughter's happiness." The line went dead. I sat staring at my phone screen, the evidence scattered around me like the remains of a relationship 28 years in the making. Through the hotel window, couples walked hand in hand toward Valentine's Day brunches, oblivious to the war being fought in room 412. The email I'd promised to send remained unsent, my finger hovering over the keyboard. Harold had won this round, turning my protection into persecution, my love into control. But fathers don't give up easily. 1 month had crawled by since that Valentine's Day phone call. 31 days of wandering through my Brooklyn apartment, like a ghost haunting his own life. The evidence folders sat untouched on my kitchen table, their manila surfaces now warped from coffee rings and the humid breath of my sleepless nights. Every morning began the same way, checking my phone for messages that never came, staring at Iva's contact photo until my eyes watered. The stack of unfinished letters on my desk had grown thick, apology attempts that started with "Dear Iva" and ended with crumpled paper in my wastebasket. Margaret's photograph watched me from the mantel as I pulled out Harold's court documents for the 100th time. Maybe I'd been too hasty, too suspicious. The internet could lie, couldn't it? Photos could be manipulated, court records misinterpreted. Maybe I'm too suspicious. "She's a grown woman," I whispered to the empty room. My neighbors had started leaving concerned voicemails. Mrs. Patterson from downstairs mentioned I looked thin. The mailman asked if I was traveling, noting the pile of uncollected mail. Even my doctor's office called about a missed appointment I couldn't remember scheduling. But today was different. Today was March 14th, and tomorrow my daughter would marry Harold Kensington, with or without my blessing. I lifted Margaret's silver frame, tracing her smile with my thumb. "Margaret, what would you do?" Her gentle eyes seemed to whisper what I needed to hear. Sometimes love means letting go. Maybe the court documents were fabricated. Maybe those other women had lied. Maybe Harold truly loved Iva, and my jealousy had clouded my judgment. After all, what father easily hands his daughter to another man? "Maybe the internet articles are just slander," I murmured, finally closing the evidence folders. By noon, I'd made my decision. I would attend the wedding, offer my blessing, and try to rebuild what I'd broken with my accusations. The expensive jewelry store on Fifth Avenue welcomed me like an old friend. I'd bought Margaret's engagement ring there 30 years ago. The wedding gift I selected cost more than most people's cars. A vintage Cartier necklace with diamonds that caught light like captured stars. The saleswoman wrapped it in ivory silk with a card that simply read, "For my daughter on her wedding day. All my love, Dad." At JFK Airport, I sat with the gift carefully balanced on my lap, rehearsing the apology speech I'd memorized during the flight to San Francisco. I would tell Iva I'd been wrong, that Harold seemed like a good man, that I only wanted her happiness. The plane lifted off into gathering dusk, carrying me toward what I hoped would be reconciliation. Below, New York's lights faded like dying embers, and I closed my eyes, imagining tomorrow's wedding as a new beginning rather than an ending. Maybe fathers could learn to trust their daughters' choices, even when those choices terrified them. The Fairmont San Francisco rose before me, like a wedding cake made of marble and crystal, its facade draped in elegant banners, announcing the Rice Kensington celebration. I stepped from the taxi, clutching Iva's gift, my heart hammering against my ribs as I adjusted my best navy suit, the same one I'd worn to walk her down the aisle at her college graduation. Wedding guests flowed through the hotel's entrance in streams of silk and laughter, their voices mixing with the gentle sound of a string quartet warming up somewhere inside. I recognized a few faces, Iva's college roommate, my brother Frank from Boston, neighbors from our old house in Queens. Then I saw it. My own face stared back at me from an ornate easel beside the entrance doors, blown up to poster size in professional black and white. Beneath my photograph, elegant calligraphy spelled out words that hit me like physical blows. "Entry forbidden, Giles Rice." By request of the bride and groom. The wedding gift slipped in my suddenly nerveless fingers. Other guests slowed their approach, reading the sign with uncomfortable curiosity before hurrying past. A few shot me sympathetic glances, recognizing the man in the photograph standing frozen on the sidewalk. "Excuse me, sir, but you're not expected here." A security guard materialized beside me, his voice professional but not unkind. His name tag read, "Martinez." Perhaps he had daughters too. This is my daughter getting married." The words came out strangled, barely audible above the hotel's ambient noise. Martinez shifted uncomfortably, his hand resting gently on my elbow. "I'm very sorry, but I have clear instructions." The couple was quite specific about this arrangement. Through the glass doors I could see the reception hall being prepared, white roses cascading from crystal stands, tables set with china that probably cost more than my monthly rent. My $50,000 at work, creating beauty I was forbidden to witness. Other guests continued flowing around us like water around stones, their conversations dropping to whispers as they passed the photograph of the banished father. Some looked genuinely shocked. These were people who'd known me for years, who'd attended Iva's birthday parties and graduation celebrations. I set the Cartier box carefully beside my own photograph, the ivory silk wrapping bright against the hotel's polished marble. The diamonds inside would catch the light beautifully on Iva's throat whenever she chose to open it. Now I understand, Harold. Now I understand everything. Martinez stepped back slightly, perhaps hearing something dangerous in my voice. But I wasn't angry anymore. Anger was too small for what I felt. This wasn't just rejection, it was calculated humiliation, designed to strip away every shred of dignity I might have salvaged from our relationship. Harold hadn't simply won Iva. He'd made sure I would be publicly marked as the father too toxic to attend his own daughter's wedding. The photograph would ensure that everyone, friends, family, strangers, would know exactly how completely I'd been cast out. I straightened my tie and nodded to Martinez. "Could you call me a taxi, please? I need to get to downtown Chase Bank before they close." The security guard looked relieved. "Of course, sir. Right away." As I waited for the cab, I took one last look at my own face staring back from that easel. The man in that photograph still believed his daughter might forgive him, might choose family over a stranger's manipulation. That man had been a fool, but he'd learned better now. The taxi deposited me outside Chase Bank's downtown San Francisco branch at exactly 4:30 p.m., the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the building's granite facade. Inside, Saturday's skeleton crew moved with the languid efficiency of people counting hours until closing time. I approached the customer service desk with the same methodical calm I'd once used to close million-dollar real estate deals. The young banker, her name tag read Jessica, looked up from her computer screen with practiced politeness. "Good afternoon. How can I help you today?" I placed my driver's license and account documentation on her polished counter with deliberate precision. "I need to cancel a check immediately." Jessica's fingers flew across her keyboard, pulling up my account details. "Certainly, sir. Can you provide the check number and amount?" Check number 2847, $50,000, made out to Harold Kensington. I spelled the last name carefully, watching her type each letter. "Sir, if the check has already been submitted for payment, this could create problems for the recipient." Her voice carried the cautious tone of someone who dealt with angry spouses and business disputes. I met her eyes steadily. "That's exactly what I'm interested in." Understanding flickered across her features. She'd seen this scenario before. Betrayed business partners, cheating spouses, family feuds that ended in financial warfare. She pulled out the official stop payment forms without another word. "There's a $35 processing fee, and the cancellation will take effect immediately in our system. Any attempts to cash or deposit this check will be declined." "Perfect." I signed each form with the same careful signature I'd used on Harold's original check, the irony not lost on me. "The stop payment is now active, Mr. Rice. Here's your confirmation number and receipt." Jessica handed me the paperwork with the efficiency of someone who understood that financial revenge required proper documentation. I folded the receipt carefully and placed it in my wallet, right next to the photograph of Eva from her college graduation. Somewhere across the city, Harold was probably reviewing final wedding details, confident that his vendors would be paid, that his elaborate deception would conclude successfully. By now, the wedding ceremony had likely begun. Eva would be walking down the aisle in whatever dress Harold had convinced her to buy, surrounded by guests who'd seen my face on that humiliating poster. The string quartet would be playing, the photographer capturing moments of joy and celebration. But in a few hours, when the caterers demanded payment and the florists wanted to settle their accounts, Harold would discover that his primary funding source had evaporated. The man who'd made his living by manipulating other people's money was about to learn what it felt like when the game turned against him. "Will there be anything else today, Mr. Rice?" Jessica asked. "No, thank you. You've been extremely helpful." I walked out of the bank into the golden California afternoon, confirmation receipt in my pocket like a loaded weapon. Behind me, the electronic systems were already updating, marking check 2847 as void, preparing to embarrass Harold in front of every vendor and guest at his stolen wedding. The taxi ride back to the airport passed in satisfied silence. Sometimes the best revenge was simply removing the foundation from underneath someone else's lies. 2 hours had passed since I'd walked out of Chase Bank, and somewhere across San Francisco, my daughter was probably dancing her first dance as Mrs. Harold Kensington. I sat in my hotel room, watching the city lights twinkle like scattered diamonds, my confirmation receipt folded neatly in my wallet like a loaded gun. The Fairmont's ballroom would be glowing with candlelight about now, the string quartet playing Pachelbel's canon, while Iva floated across the marble floor, in whatever dress Harold had convinced her to buy. The thought should have made me sad. Instead, I felt nothing but cold satisfaction. My phone buzzed, a text from my brother Frank. "Beautiful ceremony. Wish you could have been here." Then another buzz. "Payment terminal acting up. Very strange." This one from someone I didn't recognize. Probably a vendor. The third message made me smile. "Harold looks like he's seen a ghost." At the Fairmont, Harold would be approaching the catering manager about dinner service, pulling out the black American Express card he'd used so dramatically at our disastrous restaurant meeting. The same card that would now decline with the harsh electronic beep of insufficient funds. "Mr. Kensington, we need immediate payment before we can serve the main course." The catering manager's voice would be professional, but firm. I'd dealt with enough wedding vendors to know the drill. Harold would try again, probably blaming technical difficulties, asking them to process it manually. When that failed, he'd pull out backup cards, each one maxed out from previous schemes, each rejection echoing through the ballroom like gunshots. "There must be a mistake. This is impossible," he'd insist, sweat beading on his forehead despite the ballroom's careful climate control. By now, the musicians would have stopped playing. Their payment authorization also declined. The photographer would be packing expensive equipment, explaining apologetically that contracts required immediate settlement. Even the florist would begin quietly removing centerpieces, protecting their investment from a client who could no longer pay. "Harold, what's happening? Why is everyone leaving?" Iva's voice would crack with confusion and growing panic. Other guests would notice the chaos. Wealthy friends and family watching in horror as vendors systematically dismantled the elegant wedding they'd been admiring. Social media posts would shift from congratulatory photos to uncomfortable documentation of a very public financial meltdown. "Your father, he did this. He ruined our wedding." Harold's voice would rise above the murmur of confused guests, his practiced charm finally cracking under pressure. But I wasn't there to witness his humiliation firsthand. I was 3,000 miles away, room service coffee growing cold on my nightstand, watching my phone light up with increasingly frantic calls from a number I recognized as Harold's. Call after call after call, each one more desperate than the last. I let them all go to voicemail. 73 missed calls. I counted them twice, watching the red notification badge grow larger with each desperate attempt. Harold's number dominated the list, but now Iva's contact photo appeared between his calls, my daughter's bright smile flickering across the screen like a distress signal. The voicemails told the story I'd orchestrated but couldn't witness firsthand. Harold's first message, recorded at 7:15 p.m., still carried traces of his practiced confidence. "Mr. Rice, there seems to be a technical issue with the banking systems. If you could call back." By message 15, the mask was slipping. "Sir, I need you to contact the bank immediately. This is extremely urgent." Message 37 revealed panic. "Please, Mr. Rice, the wedding is falling apart. There's been some terrible mistake." I poured myself a scotch from the hotel's minibar and settled into the leather armchair by the window. Manhattan's lights sparkled below, while across the country Harold's carefully constructed world crumbled in real time. The messages grew increasingly desperate. Background noise revealed the chaos, vendors arguing, guests murmuring, the hollow echo of a ballroom being systematically stripped of its magic. Harold's voice cracked as he begged, threatened, and finally confessed. "I know what you think happened, but I can explain everything. The money, yes, I needed help, but I was going to pay you back. Please, your daughter is crying." Message 68 changed everything. Instead of Harold's frantic pleading, I heard Iva's voice, broken and small. "Dad, please come back. Harold confessed everything." I set down my scotch and stared at the phone. This was the moment I'd been waiting for, but hearing my daughter's tears made my chest tight with pain I hadn't expected. The 74th call came at 9:43 p.m. This time I answered. "Dad?" Eva's voice was barely a whisper. "Everything? What exactly did he tell you?" "About the money, about his debts, about the other women." Each word came out like broken glass. "You were right about everything. The court cases, the lies, all of it." Through the phone I could hear Harold in the background, his voice high and desperate. "She doesn't understand. I love her. The money doesn't matter." "I'll return to San Francisco," I said carefully, "but I won't pay for anything. After everything that happened, the photo, the humiliation, I won't be writing any more checks." "Understood, Dad. Just please be here. I need you." "Pack your things, sweetheart. We'll figure out the rest tomorrow." After I hung up, I booked the red-eye flight back to California. Outside my window, New York slept peacefully, unaware that 3,000 miles away, justice had finally found Harold Kensington. Sometimes the best revenge was simply letting someone reveal their true nature when the pressure became too much to bear. 3 months later, summer heat shimmered off Brooklyn's sidewalks, as I heard familiar footsteps climbing the stairs to my apartment. Through the peephole, I saw Iva standing in the hallway with 2 worn suitcases, her face gaunt but determined, looking more like my daughter than she had in over a year. I opened the door before she could knock. "Dad, forgive me. You were right about everything." The words tumbled out as she collapsed into my arms, the same way she had when she was 7 and fell off her bicycle. "Sweetheart, you're my daughter. We'll get through this together." I guided her to the couch, the same leather furniture where this nightmare had begun with that January video call. How different everything looked now. The evidence folders were gone, filed away with the FBI, but Margaret's photograph still watched over us from the mantel. "He took almost everything. My house, savings, even my grandmother's jewelry." Iva's voice shook with exhaustion and shame. "After the wedding fell apart, he became desperate. Started forging my signature, accessing accounts I didn't even know he'd found." The television murmured in the background. I'd been watching the evening news out of habit. Suddenly, Harold's face filled the screen, but not the polished headshot from his fake business profiles. This was a mugshot, his hair disheveled, his practiced smile replaced by the hollow stare of someone whose schemes had finally caught up with him. "Harold Kensington arrested for fraud in especially large amounts," the anchor announced with professional detachment. "Federal investigators say he targeted wealthy families through romantic relationships, stealing over $2 million from victims across multiple states." Iva looked up at the screen, then back at me. "They called me yesterday. I'm not his only victim, am I?" "Rebecca Martinez, Sarah Chen, Jennifer Walsh." I named the women whose photographs I'd printed in that San Francisco hotel room. "You weren't his first, but you'll be his last." The news continued with details that validated every instinct I'd had about Harold. Multiple identities, forged investment documents, a pattern of targeting successful women through dating apps, then systematically draining their assets over 6-month periods. "Harold will answer for this. Justice will be restored," I said, pulling my daughter closer. The federal investigation had moved swiftly once Harold's house of cards collapsed. My evidence from that sleepless night in February had provided the initial roadmap, but Harold's desperation after the wedding had led him to make increasingly reckless moves. When you've built your life on lies, the truth has a way of surfacing when you least expect it. "I testified at the grand jury last week," Iva said quietly. "He's looking at 15 to 20 years. Outside, Brooklyn hummed with its familiar evening rhythm. Normal families were finishing dinner, helping children with homework, living the simple, honest lives I'd envied during my darkest moments. "What now?" Iva asked. I looked around the apartment that had sheltered me through the worst crisis of my life, then at my daughter, older, wiser, scarred, but not broken. "Now we rebuild? Together?" Margaret's photograph seemed to smile approvingly from the mantel. Sometimes protecting the people you love means making difficult choices, even when they hate you for it. But love endures, truth prevails, and justice, when it finally comes, tastes sweeter than any revenge. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching,